Welcome to the Strong Enough podcast, where we talk about the challenges and celebrate the triumphs of people just like you. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is going to share how she experienced abuse, narcissism, and gaslighting as a child and a young adult. However, today she is healthier, happier, and is going to provide you strategies that you can use to cope with trauma. Please help me welcome Jenn Junod. Jenn, how are you doing today?
Oh my gosh, as we were just talking about, got back from travels, so readjusting to being back at home.
I love home. I am sometimes a homebody, so I can totally relate to that. I know that you've been traveling a little bit, and where is home for you, if you don't mind telling about that?
A suburb of Denver, Colorado. Easiest way to say it is Denver.
It is. So we're neighbors, essentially.
I know, I'm excited.
I'm excited too. We have so much to talk about. Before we jump into it, I would love it if you would share with the audience just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Jenn Junod. I am a speaker, in progress author, and a podcast host of Shit You Don't Want to Talk About. And as you already said, Claudia, I live in Denver, Colorado, and I have moved 32 times-ish, at least through a couple states and back and forth. I highly dislike the heat. So being from Phoenix is great to no longer be there. I like to bundle, and so Denver is a great fit. And I like to talk about the shit you don't want to talk about. That's why I have a podcast called it, because it really needs to become shit to talk about. Talk about the trauma, the difficult situations, the controversial things and topics that really affects us all, but we're too afraid to talk about.
This is one of the things that I love about you, in addition to not loving the heat. Obviously, we're clearly separated at birth, but I love that you really are working to talk about the shit that we don't want to talk about. As you know, that's what we do here. It just doesn't have as catchy of a title for it. But I feel like, so many people feel like they're alone in their situation. They think that they are the only ones going through whatever they're going through. And while their situation is, of course, unique to them, so many other people have been through something similar, and we can support one another by talking about it. Are you finding that you are coming across enough guests that have shit that they don't want to talk about, that they're ready to talk about?
Yes, and thank you for also talking about the part of us all feeling alone. I personally come from a background of, this is a very quick synopsis of it, of solitary confinement, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, homelessness, death of friends, self-harm, suicide attempts, and I'm pretty sure that's not all of them. I'm still working. I get lost after so many. And I honestly thought I was so alone. And I always had the knack for being able to talk to people and get their stories from them and their life stories. And I loved learning about them. And yet I never shared about myself. And when I started sharing, people are like, dude, I went through something like that too. And I'm like, what? Really? That's bizarre. And that's really opening up and being open to the universe, you could say, of bringing that into my life and starting to share my own story, has created that we have guests booked for the next few months. So there's plenty of shit to talk about from all different walks of life.
Which is unfortunate that there is so much shit to talk about, but fortunate that there are people like you out there who are willing to sit with somebody and talk about it. Now, before we jump into kind of your history and what we're going to chat long-term about today, I have to ask this. Normally, when you look at somebody's resume or one pager, you're like, oh, they're a speaker, great. They're an author, fantastic. Yours had something jump out at me that I have to bring up. You're a curiosity seeker. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yes, yes, I am. It's so funny because my mom is the type of person that she'll walk up to anybody and compliment them on something and like jump in the way of everything to be able to offer help. And believe me, after spending Mother's Day with her, I always feel so embarrassed when she says it. I always have. And yet I do the same thing and it makes me so happy because I love learning about the individualism we all have, about, there are times that I see something that I don't quite understand and I want to understand it. And it's not, I'm seeing that person in a wheelchair and I want to know what happened. Yes, I want to know how I can help, but also just being kind a lot of time will bring up that conversation. And half of the time I walk up to someone and I'm like, I'm so sorry. You have a broken arm. I can tell it's in a sling. You have a lot of really cool writing on it. I am dying to know what happened because it seems like it has a story. And and I do let them know. I'm like, hey, this is really awkward. So if you don't want to answer it, it's cool too, because I don't want to bring up any of that, like any bad juju for you. It's just, I'm so curious. And hearing the stories that come with it, when people light up, when people talk about the stories of how they got through something because whatever item makes them think of that, or that travel, or that jacket they bought it in, you're from Nashville?
I am from North Carolina originally. I know you can
Okay.
hear it. Yes, so I'm from the South.
Okay. Because I you asked me a question earlier and I really wanted to reply, yes, ma'am. And that is not something that I do very often, but whenever I hear someone with a Southern accent, I'm like, can't hold it back. But it's like, let's say that they got it from North Carolina and it brings up the story of seeing all the gorgeous trees and the back roads and getting lost. And it's so amazing, even when they talk about the shit, of seeing them bright, their eyes brighten up to
Mhm.
be able to share their story.
First off, I love that your mom will compliment people because I think as women, we are far too competitive with one another. A lot of women. I don't want to generalize, but it's always a competition, and I feel like we spend too much time comparing ourselves with one another instead of looking at the other person and saying, "Man, you have amazing hair," or "Those shoes you're wearing are fantastic." We find the things that we like about them, begin to compare them to ourselves, and then begin to hate that person. So props to your mom for
Thank you.
complimenting people. And if you don't hear anything else from this episode, then go out and compliment a female, not on something creepy, but compliment a female on something that you genuinely like about her tomorrow. And then I want to hear about it. And then Jen wants to hear about it. So,
Yes, I'm adding to the challenge. I
yes.
want to hear about you complimenting someone that you normally wouldn't compliment. So, for example, if I see a dude rocking a cool shirt, I don't say it in a creepy way. I'll be passing by and I'm like, dude, that is a sick shirt. Or if they have some dope kicks, because
Mhm.
it's something that I know for myself. You mentioned about how we compare ourselves and how we start to hate them. I went through a phase where it wasn't I hated them, I hated myself.
Mhm.
So it's definitely something that I've learned, that I would never want somebody to be in those shoes. So I want to share, even if they're just doing something really good. Like while I was at the airport, these flight attendants were so dope. Like or I guess they're the check-in people. Like
Mhm.
they were handling it so well. I was like, you guys are fucking amazing. And they were like, why are you being so nice to us? And I'm like, because you guys are being chill. You're doing great. You're handling it great. And that's a compliment too, because you're calling them out on a shitty situation where they're doing something good.
And it just doesn't happen enough.
No, unfortunately.
I
Let's
agree.
change that.
Let's change that. So that is everyone's assignment. Compliment somebody, or as I like to say, compliment somebody. And then Jenn threw down onto it someone that you would not normally compliment. So we want to hear about it. After it is done, we will also participate in this challenge.
Yes.
Jenn, when you were talking about a little bit about your background, you rattled off a list of kind of terrible things that you'd been through, and you started it sort of with a laugh and a smile, and nothing that you talked about was funny or humorous. But I want you to talk a little bit about, what it's like to be able to now talk about your trauma easily, or more easily than, when it was happening, or even a few years ago.
I appreciate the call out because I don't know if anybody's heard of like the feedback cookie or the compliment cookie, where you say something good, then you tell them the shit that you need to tell them, and then you say something good. I do that without meaning to when I talk about the shit I've been through. Because if I just say, yeah, I went through solitary confinement, people are like, what do they do with that information? Do they say, I'm so sorry? And they're saying that out of reaction. And I'm not saying they don't care, but that's like saying, how are you? It's not something that has enough or has emphasis to it or
Mm-hmm.
individualism. And so to be able to talk about it, I basically sandwich it to, yeah, I've been through solitary confinement and physical abuse, and always almost make it jokingly. And with being such serious topics, I almost have to go into a mindset change when I need to dive into them, because it's one way that I've learned to be able to tell my story and also protect my energy, because there is such thing I have found as vulnerability hangover. And the best way I like to explain that is when you bring up stuff that is very, very hard to talk about, that is very close to the heart, that you don't tell people very often, and you're very open about it, it can physically and emotionally cause someone to feel wiped out afterwards, and literally feels like a hangover. And it's something that I want to share my story, so I don't go into hangover phase until needed, like on this podcast. So I really appreciate that call out.
I really appreciate what you said, and I feel like I can totally relate to it, because I shared something with you before we started recording, something that had happened to me as a police officer. And, right before I was going to say it to you, in my head is going, okay, I'm about to say this and she's probably going to freak out, and her camera's not on yet, so I'm not going to see her be able to freak out. So I got to like calm this down before I even say it, because I know she's going to freak out, because this is some freaky shit. And all that is happening in my head, and you handled it amazingly. But do you kind of have that same mindset where it's like, yeah, I'm sort of doing this for the other person's benefit, that I'm gonna temper down the situation to make them more comfortable?
All the time. Yet at the same time I say that, I would say, as those that are from marginalized communities and also as women, a lot of times we do that to, as a society, which is really fucked up,
Mm-hmm.
and also to be able to calm the peace, or it does make us feel a bit like we're not overbearing, because we don't want to be overbearing.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I found that it's been a hard balance, because I want, I'll just throw it out there mid conversation. Like, I was on the plane yesterday and I found out that the person 2 seats over was a a juvenile, what are they called again? Uh, Afterwards.
Is this like law enforcement, like
Yeah.
probation?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that I forget words sometimes, but she was a juvenile probation officer. And I was like, and she was talking to the 2 people were talking about that she, like, there are so many bad uh, probation officers out there in the world. And I was like, when I was a teenager and I went through some shit, my probation officer helped me deal with a lot of it, but I didn't open up to them to tell them what was really going on. So, and they're like, oh, wait, what? And then it also, I was like, yeah, I have a podcast called Shit You Don't Want to Talk About. And, I've been through XYZ. And because I was able to share a small thing, they weren't as taken back by the list, I guess you could say. And I found that starting off as jokingly, like where I'm going through it, then I also find where somebody is comfortable asking questions. And the biggest part of it I can say is trauma is trauma. There is, yes, there are different types of trauma, yet it is not a comparison. I recently listened to an episode on the Jordan Harbinger show that talked had a guest that escaped North Korea twice. And I'm just like, shit, you went through some shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yet his trauma is his trauma and he's working through it. And yet somebody else that's escaped North Korea could have a totally different experience and end up this completely different, or they could have an identical experience and still end up completely different. And to go to your original question, just talking a bit more about my own trauma, the solitary confinement really shows up throughout my life in the fact that I didn't know as a kid that my dad was a narcissist, which he still is, a narcissist or a gaslighter. My
Mm-hmm.
mom didn't know either. It's not something they really talked about in the 80s and 90s. So when I would get locked in my room, my mom would just go along with it. My mom is one of the strongest women I know. Like, she is mama bear, she is loud, and I'm proud. And yet, with gaslighting and narcissism, a key thing in these behaviors, a lot of times, is the love bombing,
Mm-hmm.
where it's to talk a bit more about gaslighting. I'm guessing you've already talked to your audience about this, but the way I identify it is if I say, "Hey Claudia, what color is this sky? What color is the sky right
I
now?"
mean, it's blue.
Okay. No, not. It's green.
I'm pretty sure it's blue though.
No, it's green. And then let's say Steve asked me
Mm-hmm.
what color sky is. It's blue. I can't believe Claudia thought it was green. Like, Claudia, what is wrong with you? Why are you saying that it's green? Like, it's clearly blue. And when you start hearing those over and over again, you start to believe that you cannot comprehend what's going on. And with love bombing, before the gaslighting really starts happening, it's at least with my mom, it was they met at a party and my dad swept her off her feet. She was getting flowers and road trips and he wanted to do everything with her. And then like within 3 months, my dad, his lease was up. I say his lease was up. I don't think it was really up. I think he got kicked out, and then he moved in with her because he needed somewhere to go. And because she was very religious and also wanted to do well by her parents, they got married at 3 months. And the way my mom describes it is within a few months of them being married, it was the gaslighting really started. And with the narcissism, I don't have the best way to describe that, I feel, is when I hear of a narcissist, gaslighting is a very big thing,
Mm-hmm.
yet it's also always making them seem better. So,
Mhm.
like, for example, my dad would always make my mom seem like everything's her fault. And
Mhm.
he is like, God sent him to this earth, which I can tell you definitely didn't, unless he wanted to have a hellion on earth. um, and so by the time I was born, and they started locking me in my room, there were times where I would have they would have pool parties, and my best friend would sneak around the house to talk to me through the window because I was locked in my room while they were having parties. Or there was another time that my dad took out everything in my room and left me with a sleeping bag and one of those porta potties. And it was my choice. Do I get a pillow or do I get a teddy bear? My favorite teddy bear. His name's Baby. I still have him. I'm 34. I will own that. He's kept away safely in plastic bag. Yet I never knew how much need there was for connection and
Mhm.
human connection and all there is out in the world. And when I was 8, we moved to Idaho. And by then, my mom started being physically abusive. And it was because my dad isolated her. That is
Mhm.
another huge sign from gaslighting and narcissism. And you can gaslight without narcissism. So I do want to say that's why I'm saying both.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of people associated with narcissism or have narcissists in their life can have those behaviors as well, not on purpose, but that is how they were taught.
Mhm.
And so by the time that we moved to Idaho, my mom started becoming physically abusive, and the the gaslighting got so much worse. My dad started doing it more to me as well, and would like put my mom and I against each other at all
Mhm.
times. He would create that chaos. So I started getting the physical abuse then. And also the 2 years there, I was sexually abused from cousins. And so each of these are like building on top of each other, where I'm like, oh, well, this is better. I'm now 8 and I am not locked in my room. So this is better. And then we moved again 2 years later. And well, this is better. My mom's working nonstop. My dad's off in la la land. I have freedom. But when they get home, I'm in trouble no matter what. No matter what. No matter how
Mhm.
clean the house is or I did everything right, I'm in trouble. But this is better because I'm away from my cousins. Or when my dad left us and wiped out the bank accounts, I would have to go to work with my mom.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, this is cool. I'm spending time with my mom. And then when I started dating, I guess you could call it dating, was I started sleeping with guys when I was 14 because I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted someone to be there for me. And it was better because they were there, but then they would stop talking to me because I there's so much that we could talk about on the psychology of all of this.
Mhm.
My attachment style, for one of them, is I am whatever the type for clinginess is. I'm a stage 5 clinger. I try to let people know that now up front. And so that's when I started not knowing what to do with all this blame. The blame from my mom, the blame from my
Mhm.
dad, the blame of my cousins, the blame of being switched schools so many times for the nickname of Loppy because my left breast never developed and kids are horrible. So, teenagers, if you're listening, if your parents are letting you listen to this, please find kindness because this shit fucks people up. And it was I'm only 15 by all the shit we just talked about.
Right.
And I'm starting to do self harm because if I take it out on myself, I can feel for the first time. And I'm punishing myself the way I thought I deserved to be punished. And I want to take right there in a deep breath because we just went through a lot of heavy
Mhm.
shit and I haven't let you talk yet.
Okay. So yeah, let's all take a moment. What does it feel like now, or what was the process like for you to get to a point in life where better wasn't good enough? You know what I mean? That like good is what you're after, healthy, happy, not just better.
Damn. Uh that that one definitely has me on the back of my rocker over here because it's not a black and white answer. It's not like a simple fix. I can't take a magical pill.
Mhm.
If I could, I definitely would.
We would market
I,
that shit.
yeah, we would give it to everybody to
Mhm.
make it all better. And it shit got way worse after that. And uh it was when I got married when I was 20, because again, stage 5 clinger over here.
Mhm.
There were so many red flags, so many things that were like the relationship with my dad, other abusive relationships I'd been in. And I got divorced when I was 22. And it was a point, and it was just a very, very tiny point that after he quit multiple of his jobs without telling me, that he bought a dog without telling me, and he let it poop and pee everywhere. It was the I had to work so much overtime, close to 80 hours per week, just to provide for the two of us, all the debt we went into. And I at this point, I had been the heaviest I had ever been. I'd been around 250 pounds, and my health was really going downhill. But I was like, I did Taekwondo in high school. I'm gonna go see if I can, like, if I can even do it. And the instructor did like the intro 101 class, and he's like, you still have a lot of the form. Huh. I'm on the way home.
Mm.
I call my mama, and I'm like, Ma, I could afford this if Andy wasn't around. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, he's become one of the grossest porn addicts ever. Like, just gnarly shit. And he doesn't bring any happiness in my life. I got home and I gave him 3 hours to pack his shit and get out. And I sat in a parking lot in a local community college. And I don't, at least in Phoenix, they have a lot of the community colleges have campus security. That he saw me there for hours, and he came up and he's like, what's going on? Like, why are you here? And I'm still in tears. And I
Mm.
told him what happened. And he's like, you stay as long as you need, and the bathrooms are over there. Let me know if you need food. And was just such a kind soul. And that was not the end of the abuse that I went through, because I definitely didn't know how to cope with any of it.
Mhm.
But there was a strand of enough is enough. I am strong enough, and I can do this. And fast forward throughout the next 10 years, I am taking self development courses, therapy, really figuring out what I want out of life, because I never thought that it was possible.
Mhm.
How to get out of my head and think everyone's staring at me and judging me. And it's taken me probably till the last 4 years that I'm like, nobody gives a shit. They really don't. If they're going to judge me for my sparkly gold overalls, do it. Dare you. You want to come make fun of me for it? Fuck off. Like, that is something that has taken years to develop, and very, very small actions that built upon themselves, like a gratitude journal, writing 3 things a day that I was grateful for. I was really, really angry with my mom. And she is, oh, it's going to make me tear up. She is seriously such a good human
Mhm.
that went through shit too. And I wrote for months of things that I loved about my mom, because I needed to find a way to forgive her and let her be her, yet still have my boundaries. When she becomes monster mom, which can sometimes happen, I let her go. She can deal with it. I don't need to deal with that shit. I don't need to be the people pleaser to try to control the abuse. I don't live with her. I don't need to answer the phone. I don't need to answer her texts. I still love her, yet I don't need to go through that anymore. And it's been amazing to watch my mom grow too, because she's always grown with me, where my dad is seriously still a psychopath and I don't talk to him anymore. And I found out that my stepmom's going through a lot of the same stuff. And it's really hard because there's a phrase called flying monkeys that narcissists and gaslighters will use as basically someone to get to you. Instead of, if you cut that tie, like let's say Claudia, I'm the narcissist and you're the person I'm trying to get to. I'll use Steve to talk to you because you won't talk to me, and try to get you to guilt, like, oh, Jen's sick, or oh, Jenn got in a car crash, or something that will pull on your heartstrings to get you to talk to me again.
You just hit so many things that I now want to talk about. I don't even know where to start, and I'm going to try to remember all of them. I would like to start with something you said about your mom and boundaries. And it's not necessarily the parental boundary, but I see a lot of people who will continue to engage in communication with someone who they probably shouldn't, or it would be healthier if they didn't. And you talked about having those boundaries of, I don't have to answer the phone. I don't have to answer that text message. What did it take for you to build that boundary, and how difficult was it? And what advice would you give to somebody trying to do that?
I am giggling over here because of how like awkward it was, and how, y'all, we went through the ringer. Mal and I went through many, many, many fights of give and take, of figure out what, because she doesn't remember a lot of the abuse she went through, or she put me through. She also, when she goes into what I call monster mom mode, she also doesn't remember those episodes either. And it's like, seriously, you can tell just by talking to her, she doesn't remember them, which I am very, very grateful for. And so first, it was a lot of not only fighting with her, but fighting with my grandparents, that it feels like they also raised me, because they always blamed my dad.
Mhm.
And they called me and they were like, why are you not talking to your mother? I was 23, 24. And I was like, because she won't own the abuse that she put me through, and think that it's all on me and won't take ownership. And they didn't believe me. And I was like, if you don't believe me, I'll stop talking to you too. Okay, bye. And it took a very, very long time for us to start rebuilding all of this, because my mama, she is a spitfire and insanely stubborn and also incredibly courageous. And I got that from her.
Mhm.
So if I need to do what's best for me, somehow my intuition said, no, if they're not going to treat me nice, I'm not going to allow them in my life. Now, these were very, very slow steps. This wasn't like in my 20s, I got to figure it out. This
Mhm.
was even within the last few years, there's been flare ups where I've been like, I'm not answering the phone. Or luckily, I have a partner that is incredibly strong and can see this happening, and
Mhm.
can see when these type of, you could say, abusive behaviors happen, that he'll step in when I don't know what to say. And I would say the best place to start is also identifying it is the hardest part for me, because I couldn't
Mhm.
identify the behaviors that were upsetting me. I, to this day, if someone is very condescending, I don't always register that they're being condescending at the moment. I'm just like, I don't want to talk to you. Please just go away. And I become very people pleaser mode, because I'm like,
Mhm.
please just go away. And what I had to do was, when's the last time I was happy around them? When's the last time I felt like they cared? Do they push me to be a better person? Do they support my dreams? And are are they judging me every time I see them? And for me, a lot of it, majority of my family, it was, nope, they're horrible to be around. And it took time of this trial and error of, okay, they fixed this. I'll start talking to them again. And then I would find this other thing that they did, and I'd stop talking to them again. And it was a lot of self-discovery myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very, very fortunate that my mother grew with me, because when I found something new, that I was able to push back. And creating boundaries, I would say, is one of the hardest things I've ever done, because there's so much pushback. And when I'm used to just being like, I'll do anything for you, then why am I giving them pushback when I would give them my entire world?
Mm-hmm.
Yet it goes back to being on an airplane. You got to mask up yourself first, because I can't give anyone actually what they deserve unless I take care of myself first, which is fucking mind blowing. And y'all, it took me in my 30s of like 10 years of just trying to figure this shit out to actually realize it. And it's still, there's days that I really struggle with. And that identification is what helped me the most. There are still times where my mom, like, she's very black and white. Like, she used to work for a police station and laws are black and white normally. Like, you got to go 35 and a 35, or on
Do
the
you
freeway.
though? I don't know.
Yeah, like on the freeway, if it says 75 and you're in the right lane and the semi doesn't get over, you just splash the semi until they get over. Like, my mom is by the books. And I'm like, Ma, most rules are meant to be bent, if not broken. And understanding the rules allow you to do that. So I'm a complete opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can't think of a word, she'll be like, well, you meant this if I say the wrong word. And I'm like, Ma, you got the point. You know what I'm trying to say. And I call her on it.
Mm-hmm.
And she does the same thing to me now, where she pushes me to do better. And I just, at the same time, when she's being bossy mom, I'm like, Ma, you could ask nicely. Where's your please and thank you? I will do it, but you got to ask nicely. I'm not your slave. And I make it in a jokingly way now, because these are all things of just who she is. She's not intending to be mean. She's not intending to be very black and white. It's who she is as a human, and being able to create those boundaries and being able to be kind of goofy about them makes it possible for us to have a very healthy relationship, even though we don't see eye to eye on politics or religion or any of those big topics in the world.
It's better just to avoid those big topics of the world with pretty much everybody at this point, I feel like. You talked about realizing that your mom didn't remember genuinely a lot of the abuse that she received and delivered to you. I would love for you to talk about how you were able to confidently differentiate a gaslighting situation from your dad of convincing you that that never happened versus your mom, who genuinely has blocked it out or doesn't remember, and accepting that difference and moving forward with the one parent that you know is growing and a good person.
Definitely. And such a great question. I wish I had the best answer in the world, because for me, it was always intuition. It was, my mom she always did her best no matter the situation. And I could always see that. Like, yes, there are times where I walked home in the snow when we lived in Idaho barefoot with bronchitis. And because she had one of her episodes, we'll call it. And yet there are times where I was so sick at school that she had to drop everything, drive 45 minutes to pick me up, and made sure I got my favorite soup. And a lot of it was, I could see my mom trying to protect me from my dad. And she always had. Like when I was 16, I had the guy I was dating at the time was listening to an Adam Sandler song about a shampoo bottle up the butt. Not something that you necessarily like. I don't know why the guy liked Adam Sandler or why he made that song, but from the age of 10 to 16, I did not remember anything about the abuse from my cousins. And I snuck out so many times before that. Like literally, my mom sleeps like a rock and she snores and she kicks. So I can't share a bed with her when I visit. But I snuck out probably close to 200 times before this. And this is the night that she calls and is like, "Where the fuck are you?" And I shouldn't say she cusses because she's a very churchy person. She gets mad at me for having shit you don't want to talk about in the title. Yet she loves the podcast. And I tell her that I remember this all, and we come home, and first thing she does is call the cops. How do we get this taken care of? How do we take care of my baby girl? Like, what's going on? And the cousin that was also involved, that's 2 years younger than me, he was going to start school with me. I was going to be a junior. He was going to be a freshman. And it was like more than I could take, that the only way out was to move in with my dad. And she begged and pleaded that I wouldn't. But couldn't understand what she was talking about. I was still in the gaslighting web, you could say, of I don't understand. And of course, he's my dad. He'll be there. He promised me my surgery to not be a loppy anymore. He promised me a laptop so I could do school. He promised me a car so I could get around. And my mom had to move back in with her parents at the age of mid 40s, 50s. And she would fly up and she helped me get my driver's license. She was the one that was gave consent. She got me my laptop because my dad never did. She took out loans to be able to give me my surgery. She always did everything she absolutely could, even though she had these like weird episodes, no idea what's going on. She would do anything for me. And my dad, it's taken it. I had that sprint in high school where I lived with him of broken promises. And then after that, he promised me that he would always, if I ever decided to move in with him, he would pay for everything while I go to school. So at the age of 25, I quit my job in Arizona and moved to Indiana. Never seen it before. He lived in another small town. I have lived in many small towns. So I moved to Indiana. And it was another broken promise. It was another, everything went into collections. I now had to pay for the car for both of us because he wouldn't get his car fixed. And it was the type of thing that it finally taught me that he's never going to change. And my mom has always, always been there, even though she may not have gotten the help that she needed. But I can still choose to be there for her because she is growing with me.
I love that. And you mentioned intuition. A lot of people who have been through abusive relationships and particularly romantic relationships feel like they can't trust their intuition, that they're bad judges of character. They picked this person who's terrible, thus they are terrible pickers. What do you say to those people?
It's given me like the heebie-jeebies just thinking back on that. I don't know, and I can only talk about my personal experience. When you start thinking that enough is enough, that's when you start realizing that you're strong enough, and that really start, even just listening to this podcast by itself, is you're showing yourself you're strong enough. You're showing yourself that you have what it takes to leave. And specifically those in abusive relationships, there are, the biggest way I could say this is make sure you get help. And there are hotlines, and I know that there is tracking, and I know that there are significant others that will watch your every move. Even if you can write on a piece of paper in the bathroom and pass it to someone, anyone, most people will try to figure out how the fuck to get you out. Um, I say that because, yes, in my relationships, especially one of the most abusive ones I had, I was fortunate enough to be able to cut ties. I don't have any children. Um, and I had somewhere to go. I stayed with a coworker that became one of my best friends. I stayed with him and his husband, and they helped give me the strength to leave because they were reminding me that I was enough. Not all of us have that person in our life, yet a lot of times people at work can help doing that. People, a random stranger, a lot of times will help. There are hotlines to help. And if you start questioning yourself nonstop, it goes again to, should I have this person in my life? Am I happy around? When's the last time I was happy around them? With gaslighting, I think that's one of the hardest ones to identify, because they can turn on and off the love bombing.
Mhm.
And that's why I say, if you have the capability to write a journal, or there are apps that you can have that are online that you can, be able to incognito, be able to keep notes, that there are resources out there. And dude, hit me up and I'll do my best to get you those resources, because you're not alone.
You have two
And
Colorado peeps right here.
yes, and we travel.
We do. We enjoy it.
And it's
Mm.
getting that inkling, especially for those that have babies at home. And those are babies of all ages.
Mm.
I'm 34 and I'm still my mama's baby.
Mhm.
If you got babies, this is the biggest thing I can ask you. Do you want them to be in these type of relationships? Do you want your daughters to be treated by men like this? Do you want your sons to treat their partners like this? And
Mhm.
it's it's not something that just happens to women. It definitely happens to men. It happens in all types of relationships, and there is help and there is hope.
I completely agree with you, and I know that sometimes that's hard. It's hard to feel that there is that help and hope out there, but if you can just find that one person that will reach their hand back out to you, that is a start. I want us to talk about coping with trauma, because we have talked a lot about trauma. So I want to kind of turn the page. The first thing I want to ask you is, you mentioned earlier a progression in your life of learning how to not give a fuck what other people think. I actually had a friend of mine who is also a viewer of this podcast reach out to me today. And that was one of the things that she was talking about, was how she just really wished she could get to that point in her life where she didn't care about what other people thought. And I love that you said, you know what? People, generally speaking, don't really even care. How did it come to you to finally realize that and be able to build upon that to say, if you want to make fun of my sparkly overalls, like, come at me, bro?
Practice. I say it like that because everything is what it is. Like it is what it is. They are what they are. We all create stories. And yes, these stories are our truths, but when we're stuck in our head, we're projecting our stories on them. What does that look mean? They looked at me. What does they brushed my shoulder? Oh my gosh, why did they brush my shoulder? Is my skirt too short? Am I showing my bra? Is this showing? These are, believe me, these are all thoughts that I've had a million times, that I don't enjoy the moment because I'm so in my head. And a lot of it is, and I still have to remind myself, because these still come up. It's not like a light switch. It's practice of, do they look at me funny? Okay. Why'd they look at me funny? It doesn't matter why they looked at me funny. I'm going to go look somewhere else. Do I have toilet paper on my shoe? Okay, no, good. We're good. Might have a wedgie, but whatever. They're not going to, they want to say something about it, I'll just tell them fuck off. Easier said than done at the beginning, but it's retelling the story, because instead of, why are they looking at me? Do I have something in my teeth? Is my hair bad? And going down that spiral, I'm going, does it really matter? Doesn't matter. And a lot of it I've gotten through taking these self-development courses, and I've been through quite a few. So hit me up if you want to know any of them. I don't want to give any one of them a big shout out. And also, it may sound weird, but psychology and dating gurus, the dating gurus, I think, have really helped me in conversation, even if it's not in the realm of dating. Just being able to have better conversation, starting conversation, and realizing that I don't look like well, I might right now, but I don't look like an Oompa Loompa at all times when I go out to a bar trying to, if I'm trying to pick up someone. Luckily, I have my amazing significant other, so I don't have to worry about that. But it's remembering that if we don't live in the moment, we'll miss it. If we're living in the past, if we're living in the future, and that is the past, I dealt with regrets, and I dealt with all the self-doubt, and in the future of what if, and all the anxiety. And yes, these things still come up. But if I go, okay, cool, I'm on a Zoom to record this, I hide my self view so I don't fuck with my hair the entire time. I have to edit my own videos, and I hate the fact, y'all, I got chubby arms. These piss me the fuck off. It is not great. Yet I started working with a trainer a few weeks ago because, as he says, it's all in that percentage of the big bucket that starts to build up. We may be at 1%, but eventually it's going to take time. We'll get at 80, 90%. It's when I fuck up on a podcast, even my own podcast. Well, should have said that better. That was kind of douchey to say. Oops. And sometimes I have to check with the guests I've had and be like, hey, does this portray what we wanted it to portray, or do I need to cut it? And they're like, no, dude, that was a good question. Cool. Or yeah, I got to nix that because that was really mean listening to it afterwards. I know you didn't intend that, but the audience probably isn't going to get it. And it's a balance. I hope that helps because that is not something I'm teaching.
I think it does help. I mean, just a couple things that you pointed out, even with the camera, don't have your self view on, because we are constantly like, what do I look like? Is this okay? What's the light? How's it hitting me? Instead of focusing on the other people or person in the call. And then just saying, like, does it even really matter? That person, why are they looking at me weird? Who cares? I don't know what they have going on in their life. So maybe they just have a weird eye twitch.
And on that point, if you're really that concerned, go talk to them. Like, yo, dude, I like your jacket. What up? And I also have a cup that says awkward is my specialty. I am very awkward, and I like to tell people that. So if I start a random conversation with them, they understand. Also, I do my best to put what you could say my faults out on the line, put it out in the open. I'm super ADHD and I fidget a ton. Unless I finally find a comfortable position, I'm normally pretty good. I go around in circles and sometimes I get lost. I know a lot of people that are guests and hosts on podcasts that they need to write notes. They're not, being distracted. They need to write notes because
Mhm.
that's how they're going to go back and talk about something. I'm bipolar type 2. There are days that I'll get more shit done in like 3-day sprint than I will for the next 2 weeks because I'll go into a depression. And owning it and talking about it really does help me get out of my head as well.
Let's talk about other things that we can do to cope, especially when it comes to different types of trauma.
Definitely. And I would say some of the best ways to cope with trauma is step one, identifying it. And for myself, that's been some of the hardest things because I think everybody's been through it. What?
Mm.
You didn't grow up by yourself in your room locked up for days, weeks? Really? You didn't?
No?
No? Oh, oh, that's shitty. Okay, cool. Oh, you didn't get sexually abused? Oh, okay. I didn't know that's what that was. Got it. And sometimes they're a lot more subtle. You don't
Mhm.
realize it as well because yes, some of the things I talk about are big, yet a car crash, you got rear-ended. That's traumatic. That puts your body, that's why they call after something like that happens, you can go into shock. Traumatic experience, and it can be physical, it can be emotional, and it can be medical. There are going into like the types of traumas after identifying it
Mhm.
is there's like a one-time event like I talked about of you know being a car crash.
Mhm.
That's what I'm going off. Or another serious one is like being raped.
Mhm.
That is a singular event. Those are still trauma and very traumatic. The next one is chronic. So if I were to use the example of my dad being a gaslighter, that happened my entire life. That is chronic. That is something that a lot of those that are in domestic violent relationships, that is chronic. And then if I were to talk about my own story, it's considered complex because there's a little sexual abuse, there's a little physical abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's a lot of really random shit. And that's considered complex. And knowing then, and you don't need to do these all alone because step 3 is working through all of these. And you don't need to know step 1 to go through step 3 because just knowing and showing up, finding a therapist, which there are a lot of different options online. And caveat to that, you may have to find a couple different therapists before you find your therapist.
Mhm.
One type of therapy that really helped me is EMDR. It's eye movement and desensitization repetition, I believe.
Yes, I think that's right.
I always get it mixed up. That is something that's really helped me get through my trauma. And that has helped me go from that was a horrible memory that really triggers me
Mhm.
to it's just a memory. It is what it is. It happened. Okay, cool. Yes, I still will have flashbacks sometimes
Mhm.
and those type of things, but it's taken it from dealing on it from a daily basis to at least for me, maybe once or twice a year.
Mhm.
Um, Other parts is sharing it with someone you trust, sharing what happened. And that's sometimes the hardest because we all feel so alone in these situations and we're not. And the way that you can bring up these conversations and start them is, hey, man, or hey, love, hey, beautiful human, whatever you call them.
Mm.
It, I got something on my mind that I really want to get something off my chest. Can I share it with you? I'd really appreciate if you don't look at your phone or something because I got to make sure I'm a little anxious about talking about this. I'm a little nervous. I know with men's mental health, sometimes it's very hard to get that conversation started. Yet, uh, that is slowly changing when we're willing to be that one to open it up.
Mhm.
And those are just some of the ways to be able to cope with trauma and get through it. And it's always going to be a journey. It's not just linear. It's not like, okay, I got 1, 2, 3 done. Done.
I'm
I still,
done.
yeah, I wish. I still physically deal with PTSD from
Mhm.
sexual abuse. I wish that I got it figured out. I'm still trying to figure it out. And it's the biggest thing I can say is know that it's not your fault, and to give yourself grace and go, okay, cool. Like, this is a process. It's not night and day. And last but not least is when things come up, when these dark moments come up, when even you're stuck in your head, instead of getting mad at yourself, observe and question. Be curious. Why am I feeling this way? What made me feel this way? Is it something that they said at work? Is it because somebody didn't call up me during this meeting? Is it because I didn't get the big project? What part of it is making me feel this way? And those are 3 really big ways that you can get started on being able to cope with trauma.
I also want to give a shout out to EMDR. It has made a world of difference for me as well in we'll just call it my 2017 incident. And I agree with what you said. It turns it from that triggering moment or that horrible thing that is looming there to the way my therapist described it as we're putting it in a different file in a different filing cabinet in your head. And it's still there. We can't shred the file, unfortunately, but we're just putting in a different cabinet so that it's not accessed in the same way that we did before. We have talked about some pretty intense things, and we're going to end on a lighter note. We're going to talk about tattoos. I love tattoos. I just got a new tattoo a couple days ago, so that was exciting.
Yay!
With a group of people, we all got the logo of my podcast, actually. So first off, I want to say to everybody that did that and everybody who's planning on doing it, you guys are badasses. Like, that's amazing. And you have no idea how that makes me feel to know that this has impacted you so much that you are now carrying around the strong enough flame on some part of your body. But I know you also have tattoos.
I
I
do.
think I spied some there. So I would like to hear about your most meaningful tattoo that you have.
Meaningful tattoo.
Or exciting. You know
No,
what?
I like meaningful. I would say I have one person's name tattooed on my body, and her name was Arletta. She passed away at the age of 14. We were both 14 when it happened. She had like a run of the mill knee surgery, and she had a blood clot. And she was one of the most incredible people I had ever met. Uh, I got somehow put into like a shop electronics class in 8th grade. Like, I don't even know how I ended up in it. And it's a bunch of boys, and they're all really mean. And we need to start pairing up, and no one will pair with me because, y'all, I may be able to do my hair and makeup now, but back then, I basically looked like the most outcast child, and no one would talk to me. And she walks up, and she was a bigger girl, and she, like, all the guys, you could tell, are scared of her. And she's like, "You're partnering with me." I'm like, "Okay." And she was one of the kindest humans. We would lose touch, and she would call me, "Jen, I know you're really struggling right now. Did you get your homework done? Do you need help with your homework?" And we went to different schools at that point. She would go camping with me and my dad when I was trying to have a relationship with him to keep me calm. And she knew he liked fishing. I hated fishing. I wanted to swim. So she would fish with him. So that way I could go swim. And she was kind of, I guess you could say, like my bulletproof vest.
Mm-hmm.
She always wanted to keep me safe. And it took a very long time to learn that she'll always be here. And just because she died, that doesn't make me unworthy for living. And a lot of what I do is for her.
Do we have upcoming tattoos?
Yes, when I get the money. And the gentleman in Colorado Springs has availability. I found this neo-traditional tattoo artist in Colorado Springs last year, and it was like booked out till 2023. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to book yet. And then earlier this year, I saw he's booked out till 2024. And I'm just like, I'm paying the deposit just so that way it gets on the books. And it's going to be an elephant balancing on a globe. So you think how in circuses they used to balance on the balls.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be balancing on the globe, being pulled up by a hot air balloon.
That's cool.
Yeah, because we all have to balance where we come from in the world and what we're doing. And elephants are so wise and graceful,
Mm-hmm.
even as big and giant as they are. And yet we'll always have a past, and we're going to be pulled to the future.
And where's this tattoo going?
I'm leaving it up to the tattoo artist because these tattoos here, I don't have my self view, so hopefully you can see them.
Yep.
Really helped with my confidence when I have a lot of cutting scars here. So these covered these ones up, and I have cutting scars here on my arm, on my upper arm, and on my thigh. But yet those are some of the best places to put a giant tattoo.
Right.
So even if he wants to put it on my back, I'm down.
But shout out to you for giving that decision to the artist, because I would get mad if people came to me and told me how to do my job. And I think sometimes people do that a lot with tattoo artists. And if you're an artist as well, I mean, that's fine. But yeah, I can't even draw a stick figure. So he looks like this, it's not good. So I'm the person who's like, here's my general idea. You make it amazing. And then if they say, well, we should do this instead of that, you're in charge, my friend. So props to you for doing that as well, and giving that control to the person who will put it in the place where it should be. And apparently that will be in 2024 at this point.
Yes, unless he gets when I start reaching out to see if he has an opening. But that is also from watching a lot of all 12 seasons of Ink Master. Was obsessed with that show.
I'm still obsessed with that show. It is coming back. So yay. I'm obsessed about that. And I have been to several Ink Master shops, so that's pretty fun as well. So Joey Hamilton was on this podcast.
What?
Yes.
They're oh my gosh, Ryan Ashley.
Yes.
She's in what is that town called?
She's in Grand Junction.
Grand Junction.
Yes.
Grand Rapids is in Michigan.
That's in Michigan. Yeah.
I was like,
it's okay.
Grand Junction. I try to see if she had online bookings, and I'm like, I don't care where you want to tattoo me or what it is, but I need a tattoo by her in my life.
Like, you want to put a teardrop on my eye? That's cool. That's cool.
Just to say I got a tattoo from her.
As soon as you said her name, I actually have a dress from her. So one of her bandage dresses, like the official Hervé Léger, that I have one of those that was hers. So that's my Ryan Ashley claim to fame. That's all I got.
Well,
my God.
we said we were going to be friends before
Yeah.
this, and we're just finding even more in common. I love it.
Yes. So next time we hang out, I'll bring the dress. It'll be the three of us. Me, you, and the dress. Perfect.
Please.
Jenn, you have been amazing. Where can people find you? So if they want some advice on some of these development classes that you've done, if they want to talk to you a little bit more about trauma and what they can do to cope with that, or, if they want to go to the Denver Aquarium, which is pretty fantastic, where can they find you?
And the compliments. They got to hit us both up on those compliments.
That's right. We got to have those back.
It's shit to talk about. So that's shit number 2, talk about. And the reason why we have all of social media named that is because we need to change shit you don't want to talk about into shit to talk about. You can also find us online at shittotalkabout.com, but we are on all the socials. And you can also give us TikTok ideas that I should be doing, because I like to be awkward things, but I never think of what to do. So help me on TikTok too, please.
All right. So we need your compliments and your TikTok ideas. Jenn, you have been truly amazing. Thank you so much for sharing part of your story and for giving the audience some tips and tricks that they can use to improve their lives.
Definitely. Thank you for having me on the show, Claudia. I really appreciate it.
I really hope you guys enjoyed my conversation with Jenn as much as I did. I truly appreciate her sharing the different coping strategies we can use when we have experienced trauma. And I love her advice about when we're writing those stories in our head about what other people might think, what does it matter anyway? So remember, until next week, you are strong enough and you are worth it. Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. And on YouTube, we're on the Spear Talk channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strong Enough Pod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or a future guest, please reach out at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.